Good evening. This is Forum Daily for Monday, April 18th. I'm Nathaniel Dewick, filling in for Nima Rajan. Nova Scotians have been asked to observe a moment of silence today and tomorrow in remembrance of the 22 people killed in the mass shooting 2 years ago. Flags on public buildings are flying at half-mast until sunset tomorrow. Premier Tim Houston has said legislation will be introduced in the fall to establish the dates of the shootings as provincial days of remembrance. Federal politicians across the country have been expressing their condolences, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who says he joins Nova Scotians and all Canadians in remembering the victims. While U.S. President Joe Biden's latest Buy America strategy could hurt Canadian steel manufacturers. New guidance requires that construction materials must be produced in the United States. The rules also set up a process to waive those requirements in case there are not enough domestic producers or the cost of materials is too high. Small business owners are pleading with the federal finance minister for more help to paying off their pandemic-related debts as the sixth wave of COVID-19 causes customers to stay home and sales to fall. It's a request Chrystia Freeland, finance minister, faced repeatedly on her cross-country post-budget tour last week. Her response has been that the emergency measures are no longer needed, with the crisis past, the economy running hot, and the government needing to tighten its fiscal belt. ATCO Electric is going to pay a $31 million administrative penalty. This for deliberately overpaying a First Nation for work, then not revealing why when it applied to be reimbursed by Alberta consumers for the extra cost. The penalty stems from an Alberta Utilities Commission investigation prompted by a whistleblower complaint. ATCO Electric says it was concerned that if it put the work to tender, the First Nation group might back out of its deal with ATCO Structures and Logistics and partner with another company. While the Trudeau government says investments in wind and solar power, critical minerals mining, and electricity transmission are required to meet the country's ambitious net zero climate goals. But energy sector experts say these big projects will be difficult to get across the finish line. They point to oil pipelines, LNG facilities, and transmission lines that have been cancelled in this country due to regulatory hurdles and public opposition. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is reporting more outbreaks of bird flu in Alberta and Saskatchewan, along with more infections in Quebec, reported Sunday. Avian influenza was identified late last week in 3 poultry flocks in Alberta and 2 in Saskatchewan. On Sunday, the agency confirmed that 4 poultry farms in Quebec were affected by the virus. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada says the industry is making adjustments to maintain supplies of poultry and eggs in the face of a large outbreak of avian flu in Canada and around the world. Bird flu can cause serious disease and death in birds, but is not a significant public health concern for healthy people who are not in regular contact with infected animals. Well, Newfoundland and Labrador's COVID curve is ahead of the rest of the country. That's according to the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health. Dr. Janice Fitzgerald admits that for much of the pandemic, the province's COVID cases lagged behind the rest of Canada by a couple weeks. But Dr. Fitzgerald says that has changed, with Newfoundland and Labrador already having experienced what is currently taking place in provinces like Ontario. A First Nations community in Saskatchewan has lost one of its main gathering places and home to their government due to a fire on Friday. Grand Chief of the Prince Albert Grand Council, Brian Hardlott, says the Senator Allan Bird Memorial Centre was also a place for the community to hold events. There were no injuries in the fire, and the cause is still under investigation. Well, Sunwing Airlines Incorporated says a network-wide system issue is causing delays for a number of its flights and hampering check-in and boarding. The Toronto-based carrier said in an email that the problem stems from its reservation systems provider, which also serves other airlines, snarling their traffic as well. Sunwing says it regrets the impact on customers' travel plans and hopes to resolve the issue as soon as possible. Toronto police are searching for a blonde woman who pushed another woman onto the subway tracks at one of the busiest stations in the city. The 39-year-old woman victim was seriously injured last night. Police say it's a case of attempted murder. And a professor at Ontario Veterinary College says online vet services are helping alleviate stress caused by a pandemic-related surge in pet ownership. Dr. Scott Weiss says vets face significant challenges trying to deal with new clients and restrictions on the number of patients in clinics. Vets adapted by doing phone appointments and providing curbside service. But Dr. Weiss says a more formal move to online care would help because it also works well for patient monitoring or to prepare for in-clinic visits. We'll be right back after the break. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada must embark on more electrification initiatives, including the possibility of increased nuclear power to help get more electric vehicles on the road. In comments made in a post-budget tour, he says that includes expanding the availability of charging stations and providing rebates to help offset the costs of electric vehicles, which he says fight pollution but are often too expensive for many Canadians. Budget 2022 offers over $400 million over 5 years to expand charging infrastructure. Mr. Trudeau says nuclear power is on the table as Canada embarks on more electrification initiatives. However, details remain vague. With us to discuss the role of nuclear power in Canada's energy infrastructure is Dr. Chris Kiefer, President of Canadians for Nuclear Energy. Dr. Kiefer, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So what were your main takeaways from the Prime Minister's comments in BC where he indicated an openness, at least, to nuclear energy?
Well, it's definitely encouraging. You know, in Canada, our number one and number two sectors in terms of emissions are oil and gas and transportation. We're a big country, long distances between cities. So we absolutely need to make this transition. And, you know, the easy part is making the battery electric vehicles. The hard part is the charging infrastructure. We're going to have to double the size of our grid, which means adding the equivalent of 113 Site C dams or 96 large CANDU reactors. So I'm glad that he was asked about nuclear because that's going to be one of our vital infrastructure choices in terms of having the ultra reliable electricity to charge this battery electric vehicle fleet. And I'm glad that he answered saying absolutely nuclear is on the table.
Now, the European Commission has declared nuclear energy to be sustainable to meet their emissions targets. So could nuclear energy help Canada meet our own net zero commitments here?
Well, you know what? It already has. In Ontario, we were 25% powered by coal on our grid. And we use nuclear energy for 90% of the power required to kick that coal off the grid. And that accomplished what has been called North America's greatest greenhouse gas reduction measure. So we know that it works. It's proven. It's evidence-based. You know, we're blessed in this country with a lot of hydroelectricity. There's several provinces that get more than 90% of their electricity this way. That's ultra low carbon. But Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan aren't blessed in that way. And as you've heard, we need to double the size of our grid. That's a lot of new infrastructure. And we simply don't have all those rivers to dam anymore. So nuclear is going to play a vital role as it already has. We have wonderful made in Canada technology with a 96% made in Canada supply chain, which means that every dollar that we invest in this technology generates $1.40 in GDP. So it's really the ultimate economic stimulus, and we can have climate action with economic prosperity and energy security.
Well, speaking of energy security, we know that nuclear energy was excluded from the Green Bond framework. So how might this be significant to developing further nuclear energy in Canada?
Well, you know, bonds built this country, not just our 22 nuclear plants that we built, but also that hydro infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, and our railways. And this is a vital way to mobilize low interest capital to build these kind of infrastructure projects. And, you know, we're really freeloading on the infrastructure that our ancestors built. And that's the infrastructure that makes us a modern, developed, advanced country. It's everything that we take for granted. So bonds are absolutely going to be fundamental to building the staggering scale of new electricity generation infrastructure that we're going to need. And the exclusion of nuclear from that was really inexcusable. You know, my organization launched a House of Commons petition that got over 10,000 signatures in just 1 month. It's going to be read on the floor of the House of Parliament shortly, and it generated a sufficient buzz that I think it actually led to changes in the budget announcements and a real pivot towards nuclear energy from this Liberal government.
Very interesting. So I suppose for many viewers, with memories of Chernobyl and more recently Fukushima, the question is nuclear energy safe?
Yeah, so I mean, we're blessed in Canada, as I said, with this CANDU technology, which, you know, we engineered ourselves. We should really take a lot of pride in it. And it really is an ultra safe reactor with a lot of passive safety features. Chernobyl, I like to make aviation analogies here. We no longer fly around in hot air balloons or blimps. Chernobyl was that kind of a reactor design. With water-cooled reactors, we have a huge amount of safety. And even with the Fukushima disaster, which was really a worst-case scenario, 4 simultaneous core meltdowns, there was no deaths from radiation. People confuse the numbers here. There were 20,000 deaths, but that was as a result of the world's 4th largest measured earthquake ever, a tsunami wave and all of the destruction that came along with that. So we have a very, very safe technology here in Canada. We've not had a single incident in terms of something leading to a casualty or death related to radiation here. We're really making a mountain out of a molehill in terms of this, especially when we make comparisons to what climate change has in store for us. We experienced the heat dome and the amazing and horrific floods in BC last year. Who knows what's in store this summer? We need to take action.
Twitter is providing more details about the poison pill defense its board is adopting to try to protect the company from what it calls coercive or otherwise unfair takeover tactics. It's taking action after Tesla CEO Elon Musk disclosed an offer to buy Twitter for $43 billion. Twitter's filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't mention Mr. Musk by name, but it says the shareholder rights agreement would impose a significant penalty on any person or group of investors who acquire 15% or more of its shares without board approval. With us to discuss the situation and the ongoing trend of billionaires buying media companies is Dr. Christopher Schneider, social media expert and professor at Brandon University. Professor Schneider, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So can you give viewers a brief background of the Twitter and Elon Musk situation that has been ongoing now?
Sure. So Elon Musk, as you noted at the outset, made an offer to purchase Twitter last week for $43 billion. This created quite an uproar. It was unexpected. Earlier this month, Elon Musk announced that he owned 9.2% of the company, Twitter, and has since made a $43 billion bid to purchase the company.
So we know that Twitter has adopted what is a so-called poison pill against what it's calling coercive takeovers. So why would it do something like this?
Well, the idea behind it, the poison pill, also known as a limited duration shareholder rights plan, is to prevent anyone, so in this case, this person or a company that tries to buy another company, so Twitter in this example, against the wishes of the management of that company. This would be, of course, the Twitter's executive board, who do not want to sell, or it seems that they do not want to sell. So they adopt this poison pill, and essentially what it does is it prevents anyone from owning over 15% shares in the company by allowing other people to purchase shares at a discounted rate. And so it seems, when we look at the other circumstances where this has been used, it does in fact work. So perhaps this will serve as a deterrent for Mr. Musk. It remains to be seen, however.
Well, interesting, Mr. Musk, bringing it up here. Why does he seem to want Twitter so badly?
Well, we can surmise, other than, of course, we can't ask him himself, but he has said in numerous media interviews and made a variety of statements that he's so-called described himself as a free speech absolutist. And he seems to want to purchase Twitter to allow free speech, he says, around the world. So unfettered, unregulated, absolute free speech, which is a bit ridiculous, because there is no such thing as free speech. That's an idea. So, for example, nobody is free to make a death threat, right? There are prohibitions against that, and for good reason. So being a free speech absolutist, one would surmise that Elon Musk is suggesting we should be able to make death threats or share child pornography or all types of things on Twitter. These are not included in free speech. And this seems what Elon Musk has been saying, why he wants to buy Twitter. I think we can probably, again, surmise that he's doing so to attract people who might feel like their so-called free speech rights on social media platforms. Again, they're never absolute, but there seems to be a belief among a contingent of people who think they're absolute. And I think this would probably drive up the value, at least for the short term, for Twitter, for Elon Musk, and perhaps he might make more money, have more power. I mean, who knows what his motivations are.
And Interesting power or money, but this is part of an ongoing trend or perhaps trend of media corporations being bought by billionaires. The Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, Time Magazine, Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce, et cetera. What do you make of this? What seems to be driving this trend?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it seems to be about control and power. And sort of to outline that very quickly is if you can control information, you can control the ways in which people think. I mean, increasingly, the media provide information to all of us, and it helps us to make decisions about who to vote for, or if to vote at all, if coronavirus is real, about vaccines. We're seeing a lot about misinformation, disinformation. So there's a bit of that. I think this particular offer with Elon Musk is a bit different than some of the other billionaires who bought media companies, in that, as you noted, these are sort of traditional media companies, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, and there are journalistic standards associated with those companies. For example, there's no such thing as absolute free speech in the Washington Post. No journalist is going to issue death threats or whatever. That would be ridiculous. So it seems different here. In Elon Musk is wanting to purchase a social media platform on the sole intent, if we take him at his word and what he said, to help spread free speech around the world. And that free speech is for people, not for journalists. And this is a sort of a shift, I think, in the trend amongst billionaires purchasing media companies.
Well, military analysts say Russia is increasing its strikes on weapons factories, railways, and other infrastructure targets across Ukraine. This in order to wear down the country's ability to resist a major ground offensive in the Donbas region. Russian forces launched missile attacks on Lviv and other targets across Ukraine today, killing at least 7 people. Lviv has seen only sporadic attacks during the almost 2 months of war and had become a haven for large numbers of civilians. It is also a major conduit for weapons and other supplies coming from NATO countries and for foreign fighters joining the Ukrainian cause. Well, Germany's employers and trade unions have joined together in opposing an immediate European Union ban on natural gas imports from Russia. They say a ban on Russian gas would lead to factory shutdowns and the loss of jobs in Germany, the bloc's biggest economy. The comments come as European leaders are discussing possible new energy sanctions against Russia, following a decision to bar Russian coal imports beginning in August. Ukraine's leaders say revenues from Russia's energy exports are financing Moscow's war on Ukraine. While this, as a historically neutral country, is taking a stronger position amid the ongoing war, Switzerland is joining the international community and imposing tough sanctions against Russia over its invasion. But President Ignacio Cassis says that doesn't mean his country has abandoned its traditional neutrality. President Cassis says Switzerland strongly denounces war, and he urges Russia to immediately halt its invasion. Well, that comes as Turkey has launched a new ground and air cross-border offensive against Kurdish militants in northern Iraq. Turkey's defense minister announced the operation against targets he says belong to the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. The PKK maintains bases in northern Iraq and has used the territory for attacks on Turkey. Turkey has conducted numerous cross-border operations against the group. The PKK, which has been fighting the Turkish state since 1984, is designated a terrorist organization by the US and the European Union. Well, officials in Washington and Seoul were in agreement this morning, saying there needs to be a strong response to North Korea's recent spate of missile tests. But Sung Kim, the U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea, adds that both countries remain open to dialogue with Pyongyang. Experts say North Korea's recent efforts are meant to advance its weapons arsenal and wrest concessions, like sanctions relief, from its rivals. The weapons tested include nuclear-capable missiles that could target the American mainland, as well as allies such as South Korea and Japan. Swedish police say the violent riots that have shaken several towns and cities are extremely serious crimes against society. They also suspect that some protesters were linked to criminal gangs that intentionally target police. Sweden has seen unrest, scuffles, and violence since Thursday, triggered by a Danish far-right politician, Rasmus Paludan, and his meetings and planned Quran burnings across the country. The latest violence came Sunday night in the southern city of Malmö, where a school and cars were set on fire. Police said 11 people were detained. Well, China's economy is facing a significant slowdown with Russia's war on Ukraine and a resurgence of COVID-19 in Shanghai. S&P Global Market Intelligence says a slowdown in the European Union caused by the war would hit China's manufacturing export sector. Closer to home, the flow of industrial goods has been disrupted by the lockdown of Shanghai, home to the world's busiest port. Oxford Economics says the disruption will weigh on activity in April and into May, if not longer. Well, on the other side of the Pacific now, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has failed to get enough votes to pass a constitutional reform. It would have the effect of limiting private and foreign firms in the electrical power industry. The reforms would have undone much of the market opening in power generation carried out by his predecessor in 2013. The lower house of Congress voted 275 to 223 in favor of the measure. However, that was well short of the 333 votes needed for constitutional changes. The vote marked one of the few legislative setbacks Mr. López Obrador has suffered since taking office in late 2018. But he has vowed to submit separately a bill that would nationalize the mining of lithium. Well, the Boston Marathon has a new set of champions. Evans Chebet of Kenya won the marathon's men's division, while reigning Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir won the women's division. I'm Nathaniel Duick, filling in for Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today on Forum Daily. For more news, be sure to visit our website, thenewsforum.ca.